And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back. This is our third episode. I think this is going to be our best episode yet. I'm not going to lie. We actually put some effort into preparing this one. It's going to be a lot of fun. How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing good, man. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah. Chris?
I'm thriving. I'm really looking forward to today's conversations.
Thriving. I love it. Okay. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about institutional racism in the Republican Party. So more specifically, we're going to talk about whether Republicans are racist, right? Which seems like a no-brainer to everybody listening because the Republicans are like, yeah, no-brainer, we're not. And then the Democrats are like, well, no-brainer, they are. And then we're going to talk about dog whistling too. So specifically, we're going to talk about a lot of dog whistling and in generally as it relates to racism and whether Republicans are racist in the Republican Party. So that we wanted to talk about a couple topical things before we kicked it off. So with that being said, Chris, what's our first topical topic?
This is our news, right?
Yeah.
Let's hit up the post office.
All right. Tell me about it. Tell me about Trump.
I feel like it's already been hit up, beat up, smashed up.
Well, yeah, there's all the pictures of the mailboxes just getting like obliterated is pretty beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
In a really 1984-esque way. But all right, so to keep it brief, from what I gather from the post office situation is there is this push for President Trump for a while has been pushing earlier in his term to privatize the postal service. We see other countries in Europe with privatized postal services. He's now just so happens to, I don't believe in coincidence. If it is, it's very rare. He's pushing this idea of shutting down the postal service right before a massive voting by mail initiative is taking place. He also happens to be relatively opposed to vote by mail. And so he appointed a new postmaster, has been dismantling dynamics of the postal service. And now here we are in the system that we have today where we see these pictures of a bunch of post boxes, which is just crazy. Can we just acknowledge of all the things I thought was going to get politicized in my lifetime, I never thought real fucking mailboxes would be carried away in trucks, right? So House of Representatives are adjourning emergency. I don't know if it was officially announced. I know Pelosi was pushing it. And it does seem that the postmaster that Trump appointed said that no post boxes are going to be taken away for the next 90 days, meaning that from now until the election, the post office will function as normal, fingers crossed. That's my perception of the events. I believe that's my reflection of the media cycle that I'm currently existing in.
Right. All right. Well, let me take a swing at it, and then Tim, I'm curious as to whether you've heard anything about this. But so I don't know. Okay, so listen, I'm a Republican. I believe that my guys are acting in good faith. I have no reason to believe that they aren't acting in good faith. It is true that the USPS is just massively it's a massive revenue loss where it doesn't need to be, right? You see like FedEx and any of the other, parcel systems are just massively more they're profitable and B, they're much more efficient, right? If you want something to get there on time, you use, something else like FedEx. So it's true, and it's very within conservative philosophy to want to privatize things, right? So this is no different. And yeah, well, look, it's a coincidence it's happening now or not. I don't know. Maybe it's not, but it's probably, I don't know. It might be political gamesmanship. But let me just say the removal of all those postal drop boxes, that has actually just been going on since forever. Okay. So it turns out that when postal boxes drop below a certain threshold of usage, right? So there's no mail flowing through it. They routinely remove them and move them to more popular areas. So those disappearing is actually, it's a confirmation bias, right? They've always been disappearing and relocating due to standard policy that's been in practice since forever. So that's what I got to say about that. What do you think about this, Tim? Huh?
I don't know. I don't know as much about it. I think, all my evidence is anecdotal. I've seen a little bit of news from your side. I feel like I just listened to Ben Shapiro repeat something there when you were talking about the post boxes getting removed. Or no, maybe it was Tim Pool. I don't know. I listened to it.
I think it was Tim Pool.
I listen to a couple of your side every now and then. I generally put the thumbs down.
So you're what we call an insider threat.
But I generally agree with both of you a bit. I think Trump has been wanting to privatize the postal service for a while. I don't think that this is coming out of nowhere, but I do also think that the timing of it is not a coincidence, and that it is very likely a political move in an attempt to further the his position on mail-in ballots. It's interesting, Nathan, that you're not willing to just come out and say it's likely a political thing, even though it's clear from the way you worded everything you said that you generally feel that it probably is.
It could be.
But rather you want to cover, you pull that, you take that approach of pulling back a little bit and saying, it might be, it might not be. I think we have a leader in this country, in a position of leadership in this country, somebody that does something very similar, takes no responsibility for the statements he makes. But
yeah, little jab right in there, huh?
Yeah, just got
for all those who don't know, Tim does not like Trump, right? So,
oddly enough, for me being so center, on Trump, I'm very far.
I know.
For me being so center, I am absolutely anti-Trump. On most political issues, I'm pretty central, but Trump, I'm
not. Right.
Yeah, nothing like some good old voter suppression, which is what I'm interpreting as. Which, for to go back to last week, I'll make this note. I'm going to say it again. There's zero evidence that vote by mail absentee ballot favors one political party over the other. So it's actually relatively surprising that Trump, as a Republican, is even doing that.
Yeah,
it helps him. It would help him.
I see a little bit of the I don't think it would help him, but I see a little bit of the argument that that mail-in ballots are more risky than absentee ballots. I see that a little bit, right? I mean, in most states, I don't even want to say that because I don't know if that's true. In my state, if I want an absentee ballot, I have to request it. And I have to request it a certain amount of time, before the election. I can't do it last minute, and I don't get anything in the mail automatically that says, "Here's your ballot. Go ahead and vote." So I think from the aspect of that, I think it's probably a little more risky to just mail out ballots to every address or every person. To kind of hit on something I saw on another channel, he was talking. It was what's the HBO comedian, news comedian, John Oliver. He was talking about. No, John Oliver's HBO.
No, my guy. Joe Rogan.
Love John Oliver.
Oh yeah, okay. So on John Oliver was
our Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, he was talking about jury selection and how governments struggle with providing a fair listing of all the residents and things, as far as being able to equally pull from the society for jurors. Part of it was how do you find those people? They were doing it from tax returns, or if people don't file tax, they were doing it from. I think they were doing it from tax returns. No, they were doing it from voter registration and something else. And so, if you don't register for vote, you can't be on a jury. You're not part of that. But the reason I bring that up is I think part of the issue for mail-in ballots is how do you accurately define who gets one and who should get one. I guess only people that register, but the idea for me would be, let's try and mail one to everybody that's eligible to vote, rather than making somebody go out and make the effort to register to vote. And that way you can hopefully get a larger representation of your community, of your society in the voting.
So let me ask you something. And this is kind of a devil's advocate argument. And then we can talk about that a little bit, and we should probably move on to the main topic. But is it necessarily a moral good to have more people voting? Right, and this goes both ways. I don't mean more Democrats or more Republicans. I just mean more people in general. And I understand the more people that vote, the more Democratic it gets. So that's not what I'm getting at either.
No, I know what you're saying. And no, I don't really care. I mean, I don't personally care if 50%, 60%, 40%, 20% decide to go vote. But I think we strongly feel in this country that voting is a right and it should be used. And I know myself up until recently, so this last election I voted, I think I didn't vote for the previous presidential election. I just couldn't be fucked to do it, like I had to leave work in the middle of the day and go and stand in line at some school near my neighborhood. And it's just, I didn't feel like it. So I think you're going to get a much higher response rate from your citizens if it's easier, right? We're turning into a immediate satisfaction lazy society. Lazy is the wrong word, but next day delivery society, right? We don't really need. We're not used to putting in a lot of effort to do something trivial or easy as that. So,
Yeah, my Kamala shirt's a day, and I've been sweating.
All right, last thoughts on that.
But to answer one thing, just some thoughts on it before we go to main topic. I agree. I don't think that we don't need higher proportions of voting per se. I do think we need Democrats. To make it. No, but no, we don't need that. We need to make voting as easy as humanly possible. Everybody should be able to vote if they want to vote. And I'll say this too, the right to vote also, I do agree on this, is the right not to vote. And so I think that we're on a slippery slope where if we continue this conversation, the next thing is maybe a devil's advocate question you might have thrown, Nathan, is like, do I believe in mandated voting? And I don't believe in that because the reality is it could have come up, right? It could have come up. But the right to vote is also the right not to. However, we need to make voting as easy as it possibly can be. Like everybody should be able to vote. Election day should be a national holiday. We should have automatic voter registration upon turning 18. There shouldn't be this jumping through hoops to be able to vote. And honestly, at the end of the day, that would probably help a lot of Republicans too, because we just don't know how much that would help either party or the other because we haven't.
I disagree. I think the demographics skews heavily towards young people being Democrat. Cool.
So that means, but you know what? Young people have the same vote as an older person. So if our country's meant to be more democratic, maybe it should be more democratic.
Okay. One hypothetical, and then we got to move on. One hypothetical, okay? How about raising the voting age to 25 when everybody's prefrontal cortex is fully formed?
I don't think it's going to matter.
Come on, guys. That's my platform for running for president. Everybody with a prefrontal cortex can vote, and that's it.
In my perfect world, which it's never going to happen, but in my perfect world, you have to pass the quiz to be able to vote, to prove that you actually know what the hell you're talking about when it comes to the policies that the people stand for.
I would actually disagree.
I don't actually think that that's the right way to go, but I would like to see something like that in the hopes that it would get people to go out and learn more about what they're voting for. I think I hinted at it a bit in our last session, but I know people that are, one topic voters. They don't care about anything else other than, are they going to take my guns? Or are they going to let me have an abortion or not let me have an abortion? Or these types of topics that really aren't driving what's going to change or happen in the future of this country as much as a lot of the other things that people don't care about and don't listen to.
Right.
I think it just slippery slope. I agree. Like in a utopian world, that would make sense. Where it's like, all right.
Yeah. It's not. I'm not saying to implement it by any means. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in my perfect world, right? I've got a lot of things that'll never work in my perfect world.
Yeah. It's an ideological, something that we would all want to see happen, but in practice, it's one of those things where some people would simply be, how do you measure it to make sure people of different languages in our country can vote? How do you make sure that if somebody just for whatever reason is like severely dyslexic, and they can't pass a voting exam, how do we accommodate that? So it's just slippery slope, but I agree. Utopian world, that would be great. Utopian world, the president needs to do more than passing. What is it that random? You guys know the video I'm talking about, where he's like duck basket road Jeep, or like I don't know the word. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So here's an instance where I'm going to lean a little bit Republican. I think you talked about if they speak other languages. I truly believe that I don't think to live in this country, to be in this country, you have to speak English. But I think that to be a citizen or to vote or a lot of these types of things, you should at least be proficient in the language of the country you're living in.
Here.
I again, don't take this to mean that I think that everyone needs to learn it before they come, but like, that should be the goal of somebody here, is to be able to live in the society they're joining.
Sure, but our country doesn't have a national language.
Yeah.
Whereas other countries do. We don't have an established national.
But it's English.
No, but like, I mean, Texas used to be Mexico, so you have a predominant Spanish-speaking in Texas. Florida used to be Spain. You have predominant Spanish-speaking in Florida. So
but
no, it's English.
The Czech Republic used to be part of the Soviet Union. So what? They still speak Czech.
It's one of those things where we don't have a national language, so like it's kind of like that's the beauty of the American experiment, right? We're not Peru, where our national language is Spanish. We're not.
I know. Diversity is our strength.
That's
right?
the beauty of our.
Why doesn't Peru speak Mayan? Didn't they all used to be?
Yeah.
Well, they have two significant indigenous languages, as well as their I believe Aymara, and then there's one other one that I'm missing. There's two national languages that are indigenous based. But
man, you were trying to make a joke, and look, he's actually talking about stuff. Like, damn.
Ruins everything.
Good on you, Chris. I'm glad you know that.
Like, so to clarify a little bit of my point, though, I'm totally fine with like signs being in English and Spanish and supporting people that don't speak the language, but I think it should be an effort on the people that come here to learn the language of the society you're living in.
And the culture.
I less so feel the culture.
We're getting into a full podcast right now. We probably should move on.
I really think the other thing we're going to talk about is not going to take very long, but we'll see.
The other thing we're going to talk about, well, maybe. We'll see.
We'll see.
Okay. All right. Let me do a couple housekeeping things. So I just want to mention to everybody, we are experiencing some lovely internet issues. So if we look a little bit grainy, that's because we are, frankly. And we're working on it. But until we're super rich and we can afford to get a dedicated connection and maybe get everybody in one studio or any of that kind of stuff, these things might happen. But for now, just bear with us. And, if you can't see us, tough. I mean, that's probably a benefit if you can't see Tim's face. So... and then I think around 9 o'clock, we're going to pause whatever we're doing. Going to make Tim stop talking. And then we're going to read comments. We're going to read chats. So if you have anything, if you want to say anything to us while we're in the midst of this, just go ahead and put the comment down below. And we'll go ahead and address it. I think we're going to stop probably 15 minutes before the end, too, and read comments, depending on how many there are. So that's what we have in store. All right, so... with that being said, we're here to talk about racism in the Republican Party. So, Chris, you want to kick it off? You want to indict me? Come on, bring it on.
All right, yeah. So, let's do this. So, we talked a little bit beforehand, but just to kind of give some freshing grounds, I'm tackling this like very much on the idea of dog whistling, very much on the idea of the historical roots of the Republican Party. I'm sure we're going to get into, but
do you want to start there? Maybe we can just let's bring it up to the modernity where we actually we have differences of opinion. So there's a lot that we agree on, and we can sort of set the foundation for everybody before we get into it.
Got it. So I mean, first and foremost, I think it's disingenuous to say that everybody in one political party would be considered racist. However, I will say this. I do believe that a vote for our current president is a somewhat endorsement of racist ideology. I know it sounds really harsh, and
okay.
I don't want that to be
here
like
to stay. We need to hear it.
Wounding, right? I don't want that, but that's the reality. I mean, when we look at the levels of dog whistling, the levels of incitement that our current president has had, it really bothers me to see that not more people have reputed it, and more people have not come out and really spoke up against it. And speaking up is symbolic. It matters. It matters significantly. And part of this reason is, I mean, we look at the political world right now, And to be a Republican senator, like it's the dream right now. You have a Republican president for a bit. You had the Republican House. You were able to power through bills, and a significant amount of the Republican base does support President Trump. And so to speak out against Trump, unless you're unique in a sense that like you're Mitt Romney or you're John McCain, we're not seeing people speak out unless they're leaving office. Like the other, I'm forgetting his name, the other senator in Arizona, alongside McCain before McCain had passed away.
Yeah, I remember.
He kind of burned out, but he spoke out against Trump, but he wasn't running for re-election. So
okay, so we're going to be a little bit more conversational about this. So let me just, while we're on the topic of people speaking out, this is almost a rhetorical question because the answer is not much or very little or none. But I mean, have you listened to Ben Shapiro? And then I'll just move right on because that's rhetorical.
Not as much as I should.
Well,
I don't listen to him.
We all have that problem, but we're here now. That's why we're talking, right? But
I've listened to his Cardi B thing, and that's really
oh my God. Yeah, well, everybody should listen to that. We already talked about that, though. Okay, so ultra conservative, Jewish, like he is the cream de la cream of conservatives. He is the intellectual sort of bulwark that is, the conservative movement. He is pretty much, generally speaking, the heart and soul of it. And every other thing that he says about Trump is a criticism, right? But there's broad scale acknowledgement that since we're all Republicans and we know that Republicans aren't actually on the whole racist. B, Donald Trump actually isn't racist because we understand why he's saying the things that he's saying because we say those same things and we're not racist, right? So and C, I don't know why I was lettering them, but you see what I'm saying? So
yeah, so
support him. It's not like we're like letting him get away with something. We genuinely think he's just very abrasive, not politically correct, but at the end of the day, not racist.
All right, so let's like touch on something really quick. Before we go to this next part of the conversation, we build to the next level. We're all in agreement here that dog whistling is a real thing.
Yes.
Okay. There's no doubts on. The definition of dog whistling is essentially it's symbolic in the sense that your goal is to appease to one specific faction of the country to gain their votes without isolating them and also without pushing off or deterring other votes. So we can see this very explicitly in like Christian, the safe version of this, the non-racial dog whistling is like George Bush's speech. He says something on the terms of wonder that basically resonates with Christian voters because it's a significant hymn.
Right, he added lyrics from him into his speech, and people who weren't Christians would not understand that it was a Christian reference.
And for any academic nerds watching, there's a great journal I can share. I found that they actually studied. They broke this up with a group of participants. They showed a bunch of different ads to the three of them. And when it was overtly Christian, they lost votes in all three functions. However, when it was subtly Christian, where you drop that like hymn wording, where it would go over a non-Christian's head but resonate with the Christians, it boosts the votes up on all fronts. So dog whistling is an effective tool to gain votes by Democrats, Republicans alike. Real thing.
Agreed.
Awesome. So I would say on that note,
I think that study was done by Helen Barriston.
I actually got it right here in my. It's done by. It's called Multivocal Religious Appeal and Dog Whistles, and I can get up the guy's name. It's by Bethany Albert. Albert in 2014. So it's relatively new too, which is pretty exciting.
I heard about that one.
Trump accounted for, which is funny. So I imagine this academic, I'm sure, is studying Trump right now, but.
Interestingly, from the small amount of research I did on dog whistling before this, from what I've seen, most people don't think Trump does a lot of dog whistling because it's too blatant and obvious.
Well, yeah, I saw that too, where people call it just dog barking. He's just right out there with it. I think most recently, well, first and foremost, talk about the Republican Party.
First. Yeah, let's talk about.
Let's lay the groundwork.
Yeah, let's do the easy stuff first. Right. So I'll push this stuff forward, right? Because this is my stuff. This is my party. All right. So there's. I remember growing up thinking about the Republican Party, and I knew my parents voted Republican, but like there's just this sense in our culture, it's just saturated with the idea that Republicans are kind of like the fat cat bad guys, right? That, you know, there's a subtle sense that sort of pervades the air that the Republicans are, you know, they don't like those brown people, or they don't care about those poor people, right? And so by the time I was an adult, and I was really, really, really apolitical until about 5 or 6 years ago, I was subtly against the Republican Party just because of like the culture that exists, right? It took me a long time to sort of like get over that and figure out why that was wrong. But it's I never knew until I started, you know, watching debates between Republicans and Democrats. I never knew that the Republicans were responsible for the Civil Rights Act. Like, a lot of people don't know that, right? Overwhelmingly, and I have a link, but we don't need to go to this one because it's, you know, everybody's in agreement on this one. But overwhelmingly, Republicans voted in the Civil Rights Act, right? And I thought that was Democrats. Everybody thought that was Democrats. Right?
Well, to be fair, though, that was before the parties swapped.
Well, we'll get to that. Right?
Yeah, you finish your thought first, Nathan, and then we can throw. Because I have a lot that I can comment on that.
Right, and I don't have too much more to say, you know, pre-1960s, except for the fact that all through the 1930s, the Democrats were the party of Jim Crow, and then the Republican Party was founded founded in the era of Abraham Lincoln, and he was their first presidential candidate, right?
So,
and he's still.
So let me ask you: if I say to you right now, you know, northern states, what party do you associate in general with northern states? Generally Democrat?
They're generally. Well,
yeah, not all, right? There's definitely a mix, but
Midwest.
But southern states for sure are now generally Republican, right?
Yeah,
so
the deep South, yes.
Yes.
Well, hold on. Are we getting to the big flip?
Well, the point I'm trying to make is you're saying Republicans are responsible for all of these civil rights movements, and Lincoln was a Republican. The point that needs to be made, though, is Republicans were all the Northerners back then, and the Democrats were generally the deep South in the Southern states. So when that switched, by now saying, "Hey, my party was responsible for that," it's not the ideology of the current party that was responsible for that. It was the ideology of the party before it switched to a new name. Basically, or to a new ideology. Sorry.
My bad.
I'm gonna throw it to you in just a second. I'm just gonna point out. We just wanted to cover the basics, right? So I completely acknowledge both parties have changed, and both parties have changed several times, right? The parties have changed several times since the Civil Rights Act, right? Yeah. Let alone, you know, since its inception. But I just wanted to cover those bases like that. That is, to some sense, the legacy of the Republican Party, and Abraham Lincoln is still an icon to Republicans, right? You know, the great emancipator, still an icon to those racist Republicans. Just keep that in mind as we move forward. So,
if he's such an icon, then why do so few actually know that he was Republican?
Because our culture does not associate.
So then he can't be an icon to
racism. Okay, all right. Now you're just mocking the ill-educated. Okay, but
no,
Chris,
I'm countering your point. Your point was that Republicans hold him as an icon Republican, and my point is most Republicans don't even know that he was Republican.
Are you sure about that? From
my experience, yeah. And your president, your president seemed to make the same feeling.
Let's let Chris talk. Go ahead, Chris.
I can't talk anymore. My vocal cords, they don't have much left in them. I'm just fucking around, but anyways,
I think he's enjoying the back and forth.
I've been choking. I've been trying to speak, and I'm just all choked up now. But no, so when I think you made an incredible point, Nathan, is that the parties have switched multiple times. So we talk about the great switch, but there's actual multiple great switches, including one in the last 10 years. I mean, we have to stop and think how long 10 years is when we're discussing a political party. So first and foremost, Lincoln was a Republican by and far. He's respected by all political parties. The people that don't know Lincoln was a Republican are the same people who probably don't know who their two senators are in their state, right? Like, that's just the politically uninvolved. But that point aside, when we look at Lincoln, there are certain like heartbeats that go through the spectrum. So, for instance, Lincoln was by far and large, a federalist Republican. And so we need to discuss the idea of the big tent of a political party, and that's Republicans make up. Today you have the Libertarians, you have the Tea Party conservatives, you have the moderate Republicans and the Democrats, you have the Ocasio-Cortez progressives, the Sanders, you have the moderates, you have the pro-capitalistic, you have the pro-life Democrats, right? So there's factions on both sides that we need to acknowledge. So Lincoln very much was born as a Federalist Republican, someone who would have been subscribed to Alexander Hamilton's beliefs of a relatively strong federal oversight. Obviously still pro-state rights on a lot of degrees, but had a stronger sense of federal oversight than the Democratic Republican Party that was opposing them, right? So you have the Federalists, the Democratic Republicans, but of course you have these two big tents. And so it's just important to realize that, the same arguments that you can make against me, I can make against you right now, where it's like, all right, yes, parties switched, but there's certain linear heartbeats on both sides. And just to be conscientious of that, the next big switch that we've kind of alluded to when we're discussing the Civil Rights Act, Southern Democrats led an 80-day filibuster, the longest filibuster in history, so 3 months to block the Civil Rights Act. And that's something Democrats don't talk about. I didn't know about that until my own research in it. Right. I remember being just like, what do you mean? And so, however, when we really investigate this was a major rift in the Democratic Party as a whole. So once this occurs, Democrats hurt themselves electorally. They lose elections going forward. So a lot of the Southern Democrats flip over to the Republican Party because, again, there is a huge faction of the Republican Party, huge faction of the Democratic Party that was for Civil Rights Act, and a huge that weren't. This was like a bipartisan, just absolute mosh pit on both sides.
So it would have been more accurate to say that it was a north-south split still. I actually looked at the numbers today. It's a pity I didn't actually take down the link, but it was I think most of the Southern Republicans also did not. They were probably part of the filibuster, but or maybe I'm wrong about that. But they also did not vote for this either. So it was very much a regional conflict rather than a party thing. I will acknowledge that, even though there were more Republicans that voted for it.
But with that said, we do see this significant split, and we do see now that we're kind of caught up. And then Tim, if you want to throw down too, now that we're caught up, I think this is really when we get into the significant dog whistling era that we see in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, right? So I'm not going to completely excuse Democratic racism. There's a whole idea of law and order that we'll talk about with dog whistling. That comes straight out of the Democratic Party trying to regain these political blocks that they lost. However, you look at, I might be getting ahead of myself, so I'll slow down after this comment, but you look at Nixon Advisor, the famous quote, where he drops the N-word 3 times, you can't say this anymore. Yep. You can say this.
Do you have that up?
I do have it in there. I'll read it out.
You can just read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the N-word just because I'm a white dude.
Yeah, obviously, please don't. We're already not going to get monetized.
We'll make the news liberals chops N-word.
Yeah, budding podcasters are in jail. Justly so.
The famous quote is, you start out in 1954 by saying the N-word. By 1968, you can't say N-word. That hurts you, backfires. So you say stuff like forced busting, states' rights, and all that stuff. You're getting so abstract. Now you're talking about cutting taxes. All these things you're talking about, totally economic things, and a byproduct of them, and that blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is a part of it. What I'm saying is that it's getting abstract and that coded. We're doing things away with the racial problem one way or the other, and so on. The quote just he's rambling a little bit in the exact quote. And what this gets to, and then I'll pass the baton, is basically you can almost write a little mini equation for dog whistling. And it's basically if stereotype A, so it has to function alongside a stereotype. So if we say the stereotype is low-income housing, right? And B, the automatic association that somebody that has a stereotype of low-income housing is that this coincides with B, the variable people of color. These are not mutually exclusive variables, right? There's more white people using low-income housing than African American or Black people. However, there's a stereotype of welfare queen, food stamps going towards minorities. So what you do is you can't drop the N-word to get these racist voters anymore, right? The people that, but what you can do is exactly what Trump did recently. We're going to protect your suburban dream, right? We're going to protect suburbia. When you say things like that, that is a dog whistle, because what is it is essentially saying is yeah, we're going to keep Black people out of your neighborhood. That is the dog whistle there. Maybe not to most people, but the reality is Trump has definitely protected that faction of voters. And that's me caught up. That's my whole connection of everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
like I said, I didn't think the main thing prior to us starting this was going to be talking about dog whistling, and that's what I was saying was I don't think it's going to take that long, because all of us pretty much agree that dog whistling is real. I think where there is going to be some disagreement is what are some of the modern dog whistles? Is it still happening? Is it, how much of it is driven towards racism other than other reasons? But I actually do agree. I think that statement from Trump is a dog whistle. But I don't agree that Trump is a racist. I don't think he's racist. I think
it's politically expedient.
Yes.
You think it's just he's trying to get the votes?
Yeah. I don't think he's particularly racist, or I think he lives by stereotypes, but I don't think that living by stereotype or thinking stereotypically makes you a racist. And that's another thing we can talk about, is how do we define racism, because that unfortunately varies way too much from group to group and person to person. I personally believe it's not racist unless you are actually saying or believing that one race is superior to another overall. Not even in a single trait or instance or thing, just overall this group is better than that group, and they deserve or should have some sort of
One comment before Nathan swoops in, because I think you probably have a lot to say at this point. I agree with you, right? I would not say somebody who is. I'll agree with you to a point. I would not say that someone is just racist because of the way they may be functioning in society. I will say this, right? The institutions that we most benefit from were designed and have been protected and built by an era of this country of genuine white supremacy, right? Look at the college. I see right. Let me make one example.
I'm not stopping you, man. Keep going.
Look at the college structure, right? Colleges were mainly developed to serve white men in the late 1800s and early 1900s, especially post World War II, where African American and Black men were denied their VA loans, so that you did not have the same amount of African American and Black men. Because look, 1940s was a racist time. People were genuinely racist in the 40s. Those same people designed the modern college structure that we abide by today. And I would generally say the college structure has not changed in the past 67 years. We still function. And so therefore, the college structure is designed to most benefit white men. And that's so even though you're not racist and I'm not racist, I definitely benefited as a low income dude, even as an outside to the normative of a college traditional student. It genuinely, and that's one system. That's one system on top of many other.
Nate, don't answer this right now because Nate needs to talk. But
Nate needs to talk.
I want you to explain to me what it is about the current college system as it is today that makes it racist.
Okay. All right. He can do it. He can do it, but he'll be wrong.
I would like to hear.
All right, Chris.
Totally.
So answer me this one question. Okay. So if colleges are designed to advance the interests of white men only, then why are Asian Americans at the top of the heap currently? And that includes Asians, East Asians, and Indians. Why are they surpassing white people in the universities that they set up in the racist period?
I think it's because they're not dark enough to set off the color detector.
Is that what it is?
There's a sense of there's two things. So this will answer Tim's question as well. But when we look at the modern college structure right now, we look at when resources are available. We look at the dorming structure. We look at it's designed to support people that are not working, right? People that do not have jobs, people that are 18, 19, 20, that they're living off of the support of their family, which is good, right? Like when I have kids, that's what I'm going to hope that I can provide for. So
you're not working for upper middle class kids.
Yeah, upper middle class
that's
white
class
kids.
thing. That's not a race thing.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Its class has been built along the sides of institutional racism, and so again, we have resources available towards. You have classes available earlier in the day. You have a less amount of night classes. You have less amount of night resources. You have less amount of year-round housing initiatives.
That's class. You would have to demonstrate institutional racism first, which is a pretty big leap. We're actually getting a little bit away from dog whistling.
We are.
Dog whistling's not as I said. I didn't think dog whistling was going to take very long to go through.
We got more. Because people legitimately believe that everything out of Trump's mouth is racist. Like every article that I see, and look, the media is failing. They're firing people left and right. So I get it. They have to write clickbait stuff. But like everything on Reddit, everything in the news, everything is that Trump is racist, the Republicans are racist. Everything's a dog whistle, right? And now we're actually going to try our handy dandy new link thing. Matthew, this is, let me see. This is going to be link 6 down at the bottom there. This is the 4chan link. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up too. Okay, so racist. Like the Republicans are just so racist, right? And the problem is just like everybody just thinks it and they go for it, right? So when this gets pathologized to the degree that it has been, you get this article right here. This is from Mashable. The title is 4chan trolling turned the OK sign into a symbol of hate. Now, Chris, I understand you weren't aware of this. I'm actually kind of shocked that you didn't hear about this at the time. So this may have been maybe like right-wing people jerking themselves off because a few journalists got caught up in this, but I'm pretty sure this is actually, let's just read this for a little bit because it's not just a few journalists. This is the ACL got caught up in this. Right, so the Anti-Defamation League has added the OK hand gesture, this right here, to its database of hate symbols after sites like 4chan and 8chan began associating it with white supremacy. It started out as a trolling tactic by the far right to discredit progressive figures and get a rise out of social media users, but has recently been used by actual white supremacists. All right, so while I will acknowledge that white supremacists actually eventually did pick it up, it started out by 4chan users trolling and saying that this meant white power, right? There's a W right here and a P with my hand here and down the wrist. And journalists who really think that Republicans are really into dog whistling and racism, they just ate that shit up, right? Because y'all are crazy, right? So my only point is that the perception of the racist right is so laughable that trolls on the internet were able to get the ACLU to put this hand gesture on the hate list. Go ahead and if you have anything to say.
You're muted, I think, Chris. I don't know. I'd have to read through that whole article. I don't think you did enough of a job to clarify for me what happened, but
right, it's on the thing, so you can review it.
I mean, I think it's important to look at when did the ACLU add it? Was it when it was still being a troll
yes
thing, or was it after the white supremacists started using it?
No, it was. Let's see. February 4chan users started using the sign. Okay, all right. It's a little bit too split off here, but yeah, they pretty much got trolled into adding it to their database before the white supremacists were using it. Now, I mean, honestly, the white supremacists.
Are the white supremacists like perusing the database and they're like, "Oh, look, cool, new symbol. Let me start using that."
No. How did that? Well, no, I'm actually surprised both of you didn't hear about this. It could just be because I'm super plugged into all this stuff, but
it's also because you make it sound like things like that are all the left, similar to what the left does to the right. When it's one or two extreme journalists that are writing something for reaction, which they got from you and your side of the group. The rest of us on our side of the group generally would have thought that's stupid, right? But
right,
it becomes it becomes and most people on both sides, left and right, and definitely in the center as well, are generally normal people.
Right,
they would look at something like this and say that's stupid.
My only point is that got such a large amount of traction because there's this incredible predilection or this incredible.
What's the large traction like? I've never heard of it, and that article didn't look very long and didn't have any references.
It's there. It's in the link, and we'll put these links under the video afterwards. But this was a pretty big thing back then. I promise I'm not crazy. You'll have to take my word for it. The article's there. Go ahead and read it. It's a pretty long article. I didn't.
All right, man.
So we can get off that for now. But
a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Quiet.
Oh wow, exciting! All right, how about now?
No,
doing
whatever you do. What you did. What did you just do? Did you turn the volume up?
How about now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
A little better. A little better.
Oh my goodness! How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What about now? Sorry for the technical difficulty. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's good there.
All right. I have no idea why that happened, but two things before I bring my light back on. So I'm in the dark right now. First and foremost, just my mind is a little bit more clear on. I wanted to not ramble before, but I would put my thoughts together on a college thing. So we'll talk about class and race and how those two things intersect on another podcast, because that's a whole lecture right there. Because I'm going to defer it to another podcast because I just can't sum it up in a 30-second soundbite. It's too much to go through. I will say this: when we talk about Asian Americans, or we're talking about immigrants from China and other countries coming here, and how are these people excelling past white Americans? We discussed about this. We are looking over a significant thing, and that's that there's only 3 or 4 significantly prestigious universities in the entire country of China, right? So you have a country, one of the world's largest populations existing in this place. And it is relatively in the culture shameful if you're not able to get into a prestigious university especially if you're coming from a family of means. We have to overlook the fact that there's literal slave farming going on in farming co-ops in areas of China, right? We're talking about the wealthy, or even not just the wealthy, but the people that have access to college. So what ends up happening is you have people studying for an exam that is the SAT, our version of the SAT, on steroids, on absolute crack cocaine, the level of energy of kids that are killing themselves because they can't get a high enough score on this. So the culture there is totally different, but also for the kids that can't get into the 3 prestigious universities in China, because there's
use a white power symbol on the stream.
Nope. 3, and then when we get to that 3, I'll switch it. 3. No, but they come here to Harvard, to Yale, to these other colleges because the reality is the caliber is easier to get into than their top 3. Finally, I'll say cancel culture is laughable, right? We can all agree on this. I think that there is definitely a significant part of the left, the people on my side of this fence, that need to tone it down when we're saying things all right, cancel
culture. For those who don't know,
that is for cancel culture is this idea that when something is explicit, when we immediately think that it is disingenuous, we need to cancel it all entirely. Or someone James Dunn from
Dawson.
It's when somebody in politics, news, whatever, right? They say something that offends some people, and they end up getting removed from their position. They get fired, let go, canceled, basically, right? They're taken out of their careers, out of their jobs, because of a statement that offended.
Right, and this can be anybody anywhere. They don't necessarily. They don't have to be in politics. You can get CEOs canceled. You can get corporations.
Yeah. I was trying to lead towards anyone of influence. Right,
Chris, your camera's off just in case you're not aware of that.
I think he's having some USB issues.
I know.
Doing some gymnastics. I didn't want to I didn't want my chest hair to come out too much.
Hey, if anybody's feeling generous, send Chris some USB ports. He needs more.
No, right? But wait, ready for this? Ready? Let there be light. Wait. Oh,
I'm
man.
very underwhelmed.
Man, that was
very underwhelmed.
Man.
All right, let me say this. All right, because this honestly, this would be the crux of my anti-racism argument. Every single accusation, and I'm going to say, aside from some exclusions that I'll talk about in a few minutes. Every single accusation of dog whistling leveled against Republicans could actually just be what they're saying. Right? Every single one. Right?
No.
So, yes. No. And aside from a few exceptions I'm going to talk about, and dog whistling. I'm not talking about straight up racism where everybody agrees it's racism. Right? The whole thing about a conspiracy theory is about it's the thing that's in the gap where you don't know. Right? For example,
do you think?
Yep.
Do you think? And I'll ask you both this, and because I believe Democrats are relatively. There's a conversation to be had of like the Clintons and law and order Democrats. Do you think that to win an election, you need to win people that would vote for you through dog whistling? Like, do you think you need a racist voting bloc or people that racially charged dog whistling appeases to? Do you think we need to win those people over to win an election? So this is saying
I think about
Clinton and Trump are racist.
So
maybe they're not racist.
First off, dog whistling does not have to be racial.
I know.
You made the point that in the past there's been, religious dog whistling and
all the time,
and other kind.
Yeah.
So I want to make it clear, especially to the people watching, like dog whistling does not have to be racial. Dog whistling just means you're trying to not offend, basically not let one party know what you're saying to another, or targeting a specifically small group.
There was a Subaru commercial in the early 2000s. Like, I guess this is where the whole lesbians being associated with Subarus came from, which I didn't even know until I read it. Yeah, they put what? They put T-Town or P-Town?
P-Town, which is like symbolic. Yeah, well, it's symbolic for Rhode Island, essentially.
And then,
so, like,
what did they do for lesbians? There was...
There's one other one. It's more obscure, like just like two acronyms.
Oh, Xena. Yeah. That's right. Yeah,
right.
So, and then that was dog whistling for them.
Show.
Yeah, I never watched it. That shows your age, man. Yeah, but apparently, demonstrably helped them out with the gay community, which I wouldn't have thought, but there it is. So, but look, it is a thing, and I'm not saying it's not a thing. I'm just saying that the Republican Party platform is not like, it's not like what we say out front and then behind it there's just racism, right? It's like, I am a Republican. I am a core member of the Republican Party. I'm not racist. Like, I know what's inside my head. I know exactly what's going on. And I think, the whole reason why I have you on the show is because you, at least to some degree, believe I'm not racist, or you do believe I'm well-intentioned. But, all those other Republicans are essentially me. And I'm not going to say there's no racist Republicans. It's just, it's not even close to a drive. It has nothing to do with the driving issues in the party, right? So when we talk about immigration, we mean immigration. We don't mean brown people, right? Like when we talk about whatever the issue is, when we talk about income inequality, it has nothing to do with brown people. It has to do with income inequality. It's one of those things where it's like, when somebody tells you what they are, for example, like if the leader of BLM says I'm a trained Marxist, you listen to the person who's telling you what they are, right? So we have been telling everybody for a long time we are not racist. So it would be a lot. There's only one jump from they say the thing to they mean the thing to they say the thing, they're probably racist, they're racist. You have to, Occam's razor says if we say we're not racist and we actually mean the arguments that we say, we mean them. You know what I'm saying?
Well, this goes back to what I was saying before, where people define racism differently. And I'm not going to say the person's name, but I have a friend that is, in my opinion, somewhat racist. Right? He doesn't actually think like that one race is better than the other, but he is so far down the rabbit hole of that it's pretty close. But like if he sees any black guy walking down the street, he immediately like puts his hand on his pocket or covers his wallet, or just immediately thinks he's going to get robbed, or things like he just has these reactions and these feelings, even though this person he doesn't know them from Adam, right? But he will claim and he will tell you, and he truly believes that he is not racist at all. I
think we're getting into the idea of like acknowledging first and foremost structural and institutional racism. This idea again that we benefit from systems that were established by genuine white supremacists. That what we navigate today was established by people like, for example, like housing, when we have segregated areas today. The same areas that are segregated today were the same ones that were legally segregated 60 years ago, which were the same places that were created by redlining policies in the 40s and 50s. And finally, just implicit biases, it's I think it's something we can all acknowledge, right? Like the reality is because we exist in these institutional racist structures, the ones that they weren't created by you, they weren't created by me, but they were created by white men and women in the foundations of our country and developments and growths of our country through the 20th century, especially, that because of the beneficiaries of that being us, there are sets of institutional racism that we don't even realize that's why it's implicit, right? We don't even realize that, but we could project and perpetuate cultural norms that maybe aren't conducive because they have racial undertones.
I disagree. Again, white people are not on top of this country. By a long shot, we are not on top of this country. The Asians and Indians, American Indians are not American Indians.
By what metric?
Wealth, education, like everything that's a positive metric that you measure populations by, Asians exceed white people. And I'm not salty about that. That's a great thing for them. I know it's because they have a culture of incredible hard work. Well, I'm a little salty about the. I think I've known some Asian people. I thought that it was like an impressive household for the kid. That's just my personal opinion. I think white guys have or white families generally have like a good medium where it's like, it's like do your best, but at the same time we're not, don't commit suicide if you don't pass the SATs type deal. You know what I'm saying? I'm generalizing, obviously, but it's like it's just eminently obvious to me and everybody on the right that the culture of hard work and a work ethic that's inculcated in Asian and Indian families is how they get ahead, like in this meritocracy.
I need to look more into this, but I think that's also by that metric. Maybe you can make that argument in terms of where wealth might be congregated in middle and upper middle class structures. But when you look at the actual people who hold power in this country, there's multiple forms of capital, right? There's financial capital, there's social capital, there's political capital. Look at the makeup of our Congress. Our Congress is not made up of Indian Americans or Asian Americans. It's been historically made up of white men with the most gender diversity existing today. I'm not saying, because I know you can say this too, I'm not saying that, diversity is the end all be all, representation is the end all be all. We shouldn't just hire someone because they fit a box. However, the fact that in a country of 300 million people, where there's half of us are men, half of us are women, there's a small percentage of people that are relatively ambiguous, whole other conversation we can talk there. How is it until 2020, we have not had more than 20 to 30% of our Congress being made up of women, right? Like that's what I mean by these institutional structures.
No, but you can't just look at history like that, because up until modern history, the women didn't have the rights that men did. They didn't have the ability even to get into those positions. And it's not like when you flip the switch and you're like, bam, now you have all the same rights, that they just decide, hey, now I'm going to go run for Congress. Like the people that were of age and would have been of education level or even have the interest to run for Congress when those things were happening, they were born and grew up in a completely different culture. It takes time for these things to change. So I am super excited and happy to see a growth of women in Congress. Yeah. Don't take it the wrong way. But to go back and say that you should immediately have equal representation of population in Congress, some number of decades after that happens. I mean, what year did the women get the right to vote? I don't remember.
1919.
Okay, so even in 1919 they couldn't even vote, much less be a member of Congress.
I think actually, you know what? So I think we're all in agreement then that certain parties of our country, certain factions of our country have historically, and because of historically, have gone through more tribulations than other factions of our country. That's how we lead to certain institutional problems today. For example, Chinese and Asian Americans were not put on boats and brought over from the continent.
Chinese were used as slave labor for the Pacific Railroad line. That's how a lot of them got here.
They were. But they also were not obstructed from redlining. They were not obstructed from
bank loans in the 1900s. Now I'm obstructed from the opportunities to develop generational wealth.
Are we? How sure are we about that? Are we sure about that? I'm not saying I'm not sure, but do we know?
They were obstructed, but by nowhere near the same level as blacks were.
Right, and I will agree with that. So I'm not saying that Chinese people were necessarily oppressed and in such large numbers and to this degree that black people were. That's not what I'm saying. But clearly they had a very poor start, just like Italian Americans and Irish Americans. It's like every fresh new wave of immigrants suffered. Once again, not as much institutional oppression as black people, but they all went through incredibly dark times, especially when they arrived fresh off the boat. Like racism was rampant among white people. Like the Irish were garbage, the Italians were garbage. And then they
they were accepted into the majority,
right? Because they assimilated and became Americans, right?
Which sucks that you have to assimilate and bleed away your main cultural heritage to be accepted.
If you come to America, you should be American. You should come here because you believe in us, not because you want to bring. Right, but that's a nationalist thing. So I know we don't all agree.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that every culture and every race and every person as an individual brings something to the table, and to say that you need to drop who you are to be more like us eliminates the chance for you to be able to assimilate the good things of these people that come to the country into your own culture.
I agree. I agree with that.
And I think we have beautiful things in our country, right? Like I'm not here to say that I'm not pro-America, right? Like just because I'm criticizing it. I think sometimes we get this idea that because people on the left, we love to criticize the country. I think the Constitution is a powerful document, right? I think it's an imperfect document, as all documents are. It's a pretty impressive document. The fact that it's been so lightly amended and held up to the political culture of our country in the past couple hundred years. How many other countries have that, right? Like very few other countries. Look at Russia, right? How many constitutional reforms have Russia and China gone through in the past 100 years? Its own, right?
I don't even know my own political history. Don't be bringing them into it.
So
let's
just
give you a hint. They just amended it so Putin could.
Oh yeah, I knew that.
He's president forever now. But what I'm saying is, I'm not against the values of this country. I will say that you don't need to assimilate to that extreme, and I think that if somebody wants to.
Well, what values do you think it is imperative for people to Because this is a right wing thing. It's like we genuinely don't care about the color of your skin, but if you're coming to America, we have values. For example, the Constitution. For example, a degree of liberalism, such as we don't put our women in burqas, right? So I would say there is a reasonable expectation.
If a woman wants to wear a burqa in our country, they have every right to wear that.
Right, and trust me, I'm massively conflicted about this, but there is value to Western liberalism. I believe the burqa is oppressive by its very nature. It's a black bag, right, in a hot climate. That is oppressive, right? And it's also the founding. I mean, we could probably do a podcast on this, but by the way, I'm offending everybody.
Ben Shapiro have to wear his little hat?
He can do. That's not oppressive. It doesn't cover his whole body in the middle of summer.
But it's a choice, right? Like if you want
it's a religious garment. The same thing for the burqa.
Look. So there's a nuance and complication to this, right? So the origins, from what I understand from the religious text, the origins is woman. You are beautiful. You tempt the man with your beauty. You need to cover up, aka victim blaming, which I know we don't like. That is the cultural origins of it, right? Now I understand that there's that since then, we all have a modesty, right? So we all wear clothes for the most part, right? So I understand that there's cultural norms for modesty, but to me, that seems a little bit less like an institution or a cultural institution that I would want to import, and more like something that I would want to keep out of the country. And
so what's your
being
feeling
very specific
on a similar topic? What's your feeling on women being able to walk around topless?
I don't know. I'd probably say no, just by default. I really haven't thought about it too much.
Yeah, because in this country that's illegal, but in many countries it's not. That's oppression. We're making them cover themselves up,
right?
because of our moral and religious beliefs.
every moral and religious belief and every moral code that's even atheist is oppressive by its very nature. The fact that we all have to conform to anything is oppressive by its nature. We just accept most of it, right?
Yeah, the word oppressive though instills a lot stronger of a feeling than
right. I just mean the dictionary sense, right?
So I think by using that word, you really make it like by saying you wearing a burqa is oppressive to you is a very strong statement.
Very literally oppressive.
And let me say this too. I definitely can't speak for Muslim Americans or Muslims in general. However, from what I understand by it too, is when we're discussing this, it's also this notion of, we live in a society of misogyny and toxic masculinity. We live in a society of objectification of women, and so this idea of wearing the hijab, the burqa, is more so to say, like, to see women for the beauty of intelligence, the beauty of all the other attributes that this individual brings, and not first objectify them based on their looks. Right? Like that's the idea of it, but also it's a choice. So in the United States, and now granted, Christianity has some pretty messed up roots, right? All religions, we can play the game.
Let's get to that. But you say it's a choice, but only under American law. Culturally, it's not a choice.
Yeah, and in other countries, maybe they can amend it to be able to make it a choice, right?
No, not law. I mean, the culture. If the culture can be imported to make it not so much a choice for the daughter to wear.
Yeah, and so I just firmly believe that it needs to be choice-based. And so as long as it's choice-based and like a woman has the ability, or they're choosing to like right, you can walk away from something in this country. But if your culture is to have this, you know what? Like, I'll celebrate that. Like, cool. That's like what you're doing. That's what you're involved in. Like, you have every right to be celebratory of your culture and participatory in your culture, just like arranged marriages, right? There's nothing wrong with people having arranged marriages in the United States if that's part of your culture.
No. I'm 100% against that. No. I mean, it's kind of funny because that's an ultra conservative position, arranged marriages. I'm not saying that you are in favor of them necessarily, but like,
I would not want.
Oh, right, exactly. That's what I'm saying personally. But still, like, I think one of the big problems that we have is that we no longer have a moral code because we've moved away from religion, and probably, I mean, I'm an atheist, probably rightfully so. But there's a lot of negative consequences in the fact that we're not unified on a moral code anymore, and all that's left is our liberal ethos, which says do whatever you want. And the problem with that is it's like that's a radically liberal thing to say. Like, yeah, I don't really care if you put your daughter in a black bag and don't let her ever see the light of day. Like, act like a normal human. That's incredibly liberal in the small L sense. Like you don't think there's any cultural standards that we need to adhere to, or that would be good and healthy for the society to adhere to? Because to me, that's like,
as long as we're not harming people, as long as we're not like causing genuine harm. And I think people have a choice, right? Like, so for instance, on the same note, I grew up. This is a really callous comparison. So please, like, for anybody listening, please don't let me comparing a religious tradition to food. But I'm going to make this comparison right now. I'm a vegetarian, right? I always wanted to be a vegetarian growing up. I was never allowed to be a vegetarian. Do you know how much dead flesh I ate growing up? Like, think about it, right?
Not as much as me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I lived on McChickens. Like, I grew up on so many McChickens.
That is legit flesh. That isn't even meat. That's just...
It's straight up just, the second I turned 16, I got a job as a dishwasher, amongst other things, and I was able to start having a vegetarian diet because I was 16. I was at an age where I was beginning to really significantly, I'm gonna excuse all the other child welfare shit going on, but at 16 I had certain relative independence I was accruing. So before 16 I had to abide by the households I was in. I had to eat meat. On my biological family and my adopted families, I was eating meat at all these places. And I also wasn't Christian at any of these places. Actually, my biological mom was a crazy Mormon for a period of time, right? And so when I turned 16, it was crazy. But when I turned 16, I started finding...
It's all our Mormon fans. No harm, no foul.
That's like, why would you...
No,
was she a Mormon and crazy, or was she crazy because she was Mormon?
No, my mom was being crazy, but the actual institute, I met only nice people. Like, they really helped our family out. So I really can't knock Mormons. But I'm just saying, like, when I turned 16 and then later on in life, I was able to find my own religious associations of becoming Christian. So I am a Christian. I was able to eat vegetables and not meat, right? So I think that to any degree, we are subjected to our parents. We don't have rights growing up. But once we turn 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and so on, the beauty of our country is at that point, regardless of consequences, regardless of ostracization, regardless of dynamics that may occur with our families or culture, we can make choices. So if you choose to stop wearing a hijab because you're 19, you know what, you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. You have that choice in this country. You could do that. If you want to keep wearing it for the rest of your life and only take it off upon marriage, that's fine. Right? Like that's what I think is the beauty of this country.
Okay, so yes and no. And now we're actually getting to maybe a full other podcast. But like in that particular sense, as you can tell, I sort of have an axe to grind with Islam, and we could actually get into that. That'd be a great podcast, and I'd actually love to have. I'd love to have someone. I'd love to have someone on because it's okay. So number one,
if you ever run for office,
I know
that's going to get pulled.
No, I know. So that's what I'm going to say. So number one, my stance is way more nuanced. Right, I'm actually very much playing devil's advocate. There's a great long conversation to be had about this, but number two, I'm just going to address the thing that you just said. The problem with assuming that, particularly with Islam. You are right about most people. You can eventually just leave, whatever, crappy system you grew up in. But as I understand, probably, I think with Mormons too, but there's strong cultural apostate rules, right? Where you will be disowned to an extreme degree if you leave the faith, right? If you stop practicing. So just in the specific context of Islam,
maybe this is whole other podcast,
right? I know. So look. So my only point was that it is okay. I think it's okay to pick and choose cultures, right? There are some cultures that have good things about them, and some that have not so good things, right? And you can say, in aggregate, I kind of don't want Pakistani culture here, right? Because there's a lot of good things. I'm sure they make like whatever it is. I'm sure there's good stuff about the culture. I'm sure they have great food. I'm sure they have. They probably even have some. I just don't. I'm sorry. I don't know anything about Pakistani culture except for the negative things that I've heard. Right, so I should probably stop talking about that. But like,
yeah, that's exactly the point, though. Is that we generally are these types of racial comments are made about stuff we don't know.
Culture, not race. Culture,
sure, cultural.
But no, not sure.
You made a cultural comment. Yes. I'm talking about racial as well. Racial, cultural, any of these types of, comments that are derogatory towards groups of people are usually made with a lot of ignorance behind them. You said, I don't want Pakistani culture here, but I don't know anything about their culture other than the negative stuff.
Right, but okay, so I do know about the negative stuff, and that's enough to say no. Do you want female genital mutilation? That's something I don't like. That's part of.
I'm not saying that you need to assimilate all of a culture, but you also shouldn't say, I don't want any of somebody's culture if you don't know enough about it.
My point was, so this whole thing started with assimilation. There's good parts to the Pakistani culture that they can assimilate into the American dream. And then there's bad stuff. There's really bad stuff that I don't want. And that's, I think.
Yeah, this goes back to what you were saying before, which I disagree with, which was, you said we don't have a base set of morals anymore, and I strongly disagree with that. I think in the past, historically in this country and in the world more so, the cultural base set of morals was derived from religion, and I think that's leaving this society and worldwide in most Western cultures at a very fast pace. And so you have the people that still subscribe to those moral bases, saying that the other people don't have morals anymore, but we do. And our morals are not derived from a book or from a religion, but they're derived from our society and from our experiences and from our laws. And I think that those morals stand just as strong and just as true as those that were derived from religion. So I venture to bet that if we sat down and compared morals, myself and you, we would have very, very, very many the same. And I am not religious at all. Atheist. Or to Chris, who's a Christian, but to anyone, right? In this country, mostly our morals are going to be well aligned, even if our religious beliefs are not.
Look, this is a very very, very complex topic, and you and I have talked about this for I think about 4 hours straight.
I do just want to say, I think writing off a whole culture, like saying Pakistani culture has is
let me
super
stop you there.
callous.
I'm not. I promise. Okay, all right. I know it sounds like, and I'm slurring my words a little bit here, but I promise I'm not writing off whole cultures. I'm merely trying to make a point about assimilation.
I realize you're representing also like a considerable portion of a political side of the spectrum. I realize people do genuinely believe that. I just believe that, not just believe, I know if you're like my dad was Iranian. I never met him, not Pakistani, but I never met him. I spent a lot of time just reading up on culture. I wanted to learn like what would he have grown up in. And there's a lot
of. Did you say Iranian?
He's Iranian, yeah. There's a lot of
Persian culture, by the way, right? So please just allow me to interject real quick so everybody knows I'm not piggybacking off you. Right, so all those ignorant comments I just made about Pakistan, I've heard great things about Persian culture, which is Iranian. They have a vibrant culture and an amazing history, right? And so
same with Pakistani, right? Like there's so much beauty and value.
Right, but I haven't heard that about Pakistan.
Well, maybe the people you're listening to are just really fucked up.
Right, but the people I'm listening to said those things about Iran, right? So like, there's a difference between, like, you can differentiate between cultures. Like that's kind of all the right's trying to say here. It's like I love America for its values. Therefore, if a different culture has different values, you need to consider them carefully before allowing them in, right? If it doesn't jive with Western liberalism, you should probably be careful about letting it in. And that's the essence of a conservative statement. I understand.
And I don't think it's liberalism that. My gut feeling, my opinion is that on the Republican Party, it's not just liberalism that they stand for. If it was, I don't think people that have lived in this country for generations would disagree with the stance on the Republican Party. But if you look at it, 81% of black men and 98% of black women vote Democratic. Why is that? It's not because they don't believe in liberalism.
I'm not sure why. I'm sorry. I kind of missed the context there. Could you say that again?
So you're saying that the Republican Party's stance is, generally just liberalism, right? You're by choice, freedom, whatever.
Yeah, so like American liberalism with a small L. For those who are listening, I'm not saying that conservatives are liberals. I'm not saying that. So I mean the American tradition of freedom and values and all that kind of stuff.
Right, exactly. And so my comment is, for African American families that have lived in this country for generations, that should be subscribing to the same base morals and beliefs on liberalism and other things that you're claiming that this country stands on, you would expect to see an equal break or diversity in voting between black groups to white groups. Both have been here for generations, right? Both have grown up in this culture. So why is it then, if it's purely liberalism that is the driving force behind the statements from the Republican Party, that it drives so many black groups away? And so the statistics I was stating were that 81% of black male voters vote Democrat and 98% of black female voters vote Democrat. So why is that? What is it that's alienating them from your party? So your argument is it's not racism, that there's no racist comments. What is it about the Republican Party that alienates the black community?
Chris hasn't talked in a while. I swear to God, I'm not copping out, but because I haven't answered for that. But Chris,
no, go for it.
Okay, all right. So what's alienating them is probably a multi-layered thing. But there has been a campaign to tell them that the Republicans are racist. Right. This has been an active, ongoing cultural push by the left to tell them that since the conservatives are not, say, pro-welfare, that they are not pro-black, right? But there's the disconnect there, right? Just because conservatives are not pro-welfare, they're also not pro-welfare for white people, right? It's not a race thing, right? So all of these issues where conservatives are small government or limited government or small programs or scaling back of benefits or there's just a multitude of issues that sort of intersect that could be racism and could be attributed to racism, but are just actually what they are at face value. And the Democrats have used those as a wedge issue, as a disingenuous ad hominem attack to say, look at them, they don't want to provide you with benefits, therefore they are racist. and so most black people in the Democratic Party. And funny enough, Trump is actually winning over an unprecedented amount of black people. He has the highest approval rating, I believe, since Reagan, right? And if he was, if he was actually racist, why would the black people start gravitating towards him instead of 99% black men not voting for him and then 100% of black women not voting for him?
I'll say two things. I think first and foremost, I think we're missing out on a key factor here, and that's both Republicans and Democrats, but by and large, the roots of this come from Nixon and Reagan's era, and then kind of the final nails in the coffin come from the '94 crime bill with Clinton and three strike rules and minimum sentencing, all that. These laws disproportionately impacted African American, black and brown individuals. You have, and even when we say that we can, right, because we can also say, simply put, that there are more white people in jail than African American and black people. However, when we consider, what was that?
But not by percentage.
Yeah, not by proportion to each race and ethnicity. It's a disproportionate over arresting of African Americans and black men and women.
Nope.
The reality is,
you made a jump there.
No. But also we can say this is that the sentencing of African American and black people, the same sentences that they receive, are significantly harsher for the same crimes that a white person would commit. And so I think when we look at these, and this is because of over policing in predominantly minority communities, this is due to the drug laws that were absurdly placed in this country, when the reality is all races do drugs at the same frequency. It's just, right, like
well, then it's not the fault of the law, it's the fault of the enforcement of the law.
Exactly. And so the enforcement, you have over enforcement on people of color. And so I think these things, Democrats were able to kind of position themselves as, in the last 20 years, very much so, as the anti, enforcement of these over punishing laws of like minimum sentences.
I mean, you kind of hinted towards the fact that those laws were, the cause of the issue, right? And I kind of was trying to counter that a little bit and saying it's not the law that caused the problem, it's how it was enforced. But to that point, you also said that, the drug laws and all of those things that were put into place were disproportionately affected, African Americans, and that kind of implies that the law itself was to blame. So my question, I guess, is, do you think that the law was a systematically racial law, or do you think that, do you think that the intent? So, two questions there. Do you think that the intention behind it was racial, that it was targeted racially, and then B, do you think that the law itself actually ended up being a systematically racial issue? Or do you think that it was the way things were enforced, or the fact that that culture participated in drug use more or less? I don't know the statistics on who uses drugs more or less or anything, so I don't know about that, but I'm asking that question.
Yeah, I think this might be a whole, and that's a whole other podcast. Not to deflect, because I think the question
you're not copping out. That's a big issue.
I genuinely think that is one of the best questions I've ever heard, and it's one that genuinely is like, was the initial law racially motivated? Was the enforcement of it, or was the impact of it, right? That's a whole beautiful podcast right there to discuss, because there's compelling conversations on the root of it, and then you can really dive into the play of media, the idea of once the media kind of started coining the word super predators, right? Like there's so much that goes into that question. I couldn't wrap it up in a period of time that would be appropriate to this podcast.
Right. Yeah. We definitely should. We should do a podcast on straight up institutional racism. But I mean, we've toed around this issue for a couple episodes. We'll probably switch it up for the next couple of episodes, but we'll get to it eventually.
How's our comments looking?
Yeah, so I wanted to point out that we blew right past our 9:00 comment reading time. And I'm thinking probably the best thing to do is to just I only see 3 right now, so I think we can probably just tie all these up at the end of the episode. Right? We could. I mean, it's 9:25, right? We're gonna end at 10:00, so we might as well. Or wait, are we ending now? What do you guys want to do? What was the plan? Were we supposed to end at 9:30 or 10?
I think 9:30
I'm
was
good
the
to go.
we can go a little over. We can go a bit over if we want to tackle comments, but we can make a consensus right now, just kind of where we all stand. I mean, just from my position, I think we're all in agreement on the dog whistling thing, that is a legitimate tactic for each political party. I think an existing disagreement that we're going to have is potentially to what extent political parties benefit off of racial dog whistling. And at the end of the day, I do think, again, we want similar things. We want like values for this country. We want moral compass for this country. How we generate that moral compass, or rather how many dynamics go into generating that moral compass, may be up for continued debate.
While it's on my mind, I want to say something to the viewers. Sorry if I say your name wrong. Jamil made a comment that I really think I would love to see more of, which is kind of suggesting what they want us to talk about. What are some of the topics that they're interested in us digging into?
Yeah.
So his example was, he said he'd like to hear us talk more about identity politics, and specifically speaking on Black conservatives and their portrayal on media. So, yeah, definitely to the viewers, to people that are watching, give us some ideas. What do you want to hear us talk about? We're just kind of throwing stuff together and talking about what comes to mind, but I think it'd be great for us to also talk about things that we aren't already knowledgeable about, and something that we may have to go out and investigate a little bit more. So yeah, please give us some ideas.
Well, I mean, already, on that note, already I actually learned a lot. Well, not too much, I know everything, but like I learned a fair bit.
Typical Republican,
and that's also kind of funny. That's something to learn. It's like I'm in the culture all the time. You and me, Chris, we're in this 24/7. We see all this stuff, and we know a lot of stuff, and we're very, very, we're on our side. We're on our team. But it's funny. It's because it's like I had to, and everybody does this to a certain degree. Everybody does this. I had to go out and in some cases figure out why I was right. Right. So I was backfilling facts to fit the narrative, and everybody does that. Right. It's technically a disingenuous way to do it. And we should all strive to be better. I've got, as you can see, I have rules of, whatever the heck it is up here. 10 Commandments of Logic. Sorry, it's mirrored, so I can't actually read it.
Do you guys know, have you ever seen this is a little off topic, but kind of not. Have you ever seen the YouTube channel Veritasium? Do you guys know what that is?
Nope.
It's a physics YouTube channel. But the guy who does it is really, really good. And his latest one doesn't seem to be on topic at all. His question is asking, is the old wives' tale that your mattress gains 10 times its original weight or whatever, or no, double its original weight in 10 years, is what its video is about. But he goes into a good detail of exactly what you were talking about, Nathan, which is not backfilling your pre-existing beliefs. And so one of the simple things he talks about to not do is do not type into Google what you're trying to verify, right? Like, if your question is, what makes Republicans racist? And so you go to Google and you say, why are Republicans racist? The results you're going to get are going to be biased, right? Versus why are, Democrats not racist, right? You're going to get biased results. You have to type in very neutral things to get fair data. So just a comment on what you were saying.
Yeah, quality research questions is a skill in itself. Yeah. Being able to develop a research question is part of the craft of being an academic. It's one of the reasons why I think so many people in upper levels of academia, not to go on a tangent, but get so frustrated when we hop on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and people are just throwing around links, and it's memes. Just like, come on, we've spent months of our lives just learning how to write a hypothesis, and that sounds like a waste of time. Maybe you'd be like, wow, why didn't it take you sooner? But the part of it really is like, how do you fit your research question, your idea, in a way that you can produce truly just pure results, right? The pure answer of a question is hard to find, and so often than not, we just kind of throw things around.
Chaff is hard.
Should we do just a wrap up, like a couple minute wrap up of each of our positions now after we talked?
Sure.
I don't mind going first. So, my general belief is that yes, there are racists in the Republican Party, but the Republican Party as a whole is not racist. Yes, there are racists in the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party as a whole is not racist, right? I truly believe that there are all variations and levels of racism spread throughout the community, and I do think it's more of a bell curve. I think you have some really extremely racist people on the extremes and on the sides, but the majority of people are not racist or have a very minor amount of stereotyping or bias. Yeah, bias is a better word than racism, right? So
specifically race bias.
Yeah. If I'm white and I'm more familiar with white culture, and I'm not saying this is what I would do, I'm just saying I can understand this mentality. If I'm white and I'm familiar with white culture, and I have a white person and a black person come in and apply for a job, and they have pretty equal qualifications, it's likely that I'm going to hire the person that I more identify with, right? And so some people would say, well, that's racist, and other people would say, well, that makes sense. And so, like, that's what I mean by having a different variety of things, where I think there are people that are racist or they would just never interview a black person. That's obviously racist, right? So where you define that line is very, very hard. But I think the reason, a good portion of the reason that the Republican Party gets such a bad rap is because of the people that make up the Republican Party. Not to say that they're racist, but when you look at the Republican Party being heavily weighted towards older people, right? So I'm looking at the statistics of people that voted for Trump. And if you are 50 years or older, you more likely voted for Trump. And if you're 50 years or younger, you more likely voted Democrat, right? So the older you are, in my opinion, the more likely you are to have some of those racist tendencies, because you grew up in a culture that was closer to the time when those were normal and those were being more spread freely through the culture. Similarly, the 54% of whites voted Republican. So more often than not, white people vote Republican, whereas very few black people vote Republican. So you have old white people and predominantly old white men that vote Republican, and that's what the stereotype of a racist person is. So I think just because of the makeup of the party, people point that way a lot. I don't know. And it could just be that your policies tend towards that group. And so it also says that your policies are racist when they're not racistly driven.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll go next. So, if you don't mind, Chris. Okay, so...
you may.
Yeah, so I think I've tried to demonstrate, but we were all over the place, but I've tried to demonstrate that the wide-held perception that Republicans are racist is generally it's a racism of the gaps, essentially, whereas comes from the term God of the gaps, where everything that wasn't explainable by science was God, right? But so everything that could be racism is racism, and I can speak from personal experience. I can speak to what I believe. I can speak to I can speak to the people that I listen to on a daily basis. It's laughable, right? It's laughable. Like, Steven Crowder makes whole skits on this thing. Like, he dresses up as Hitler, not because he's slightly friendly to Hitler or maybe thinks Hitler was okay or he would like to get Hitler's vote in an election. He dressed up like him because he knows that it trolls people, because they just are quaking in fear because they think that the neo-Nazis are coming for them. It's just like everybody on the right just acknowledges how it's almost funny how racist people think we are, and it's not on the map. There's not even so that's not even a question. The only question that one could probably rationally ask is are Republicans okay with getting racist votes, and how many people are they, right? And it's just, I haven't seen any data to indicate that this is a swing portion of the population. That if Donald Trump, well, I was going to say if Donald Trump would come out against white supremacists, he would lose them. Donald Trump has explicitly come out against white supremacists. Explicitly. Like, not the white supremacists. I condemn them totally. That's a direct quote, pretty much. So I just, for anybody who's listening, maybe just, I suppose, take a Republican at his word. Listen to the argument he's actually putting forward. Maybe he is racist. I don't think he is.
Yeah. So I think awesome. So just gathering my thoughts in my head, but I truly believe that you're not a racist person, Nathan. Right? Like, I don't think all Republicans are racist, so I'll say that pretty much up front. I do believe that our current president is racist, or let's just say he's not racist. And I'm going to be relatively unmoved on this position, and I will give you a position that maybe is more agreeable with you. But on this, I believe our current president is racist. If he is not racist, then he has done actions that are perceived as racist, which, at the same time, it's like, all right, how much benefit can we give somebody if all you're doing is, saying people on both sides of the aisle, or like with Charlottesville, there's nice people on both sides. Like, I get what he's saying.
Right, that quote that I gave you, by the way, was from there. He said, "Not the white supremacists, them I contemn totally." He said that in that speech.
Definitely. So, and I agree. Right. So he's gone out right and said things for whatever reason. I'm relatively going to be unchanged on this. I think most people on my side of the aisle are going to be unchanged. It'll be something you might have to like. And I can be changed.
I know you can. I can be changed. That's why you're on this podcast, man. I know you're a genuine person.
Yeah, and you too, right? You too. I think even in this podcast itself, we're talking about Pakistani culture. I think you relatively checked yourself, or at least checked the idea that you were defending of other people in your political. Right? It's like, okay, maybe we need to hold back and learn a little bit more.
Yeah, we're gonna need a longer podcast for nope. Everybody, please don't hate me forever. I promise we'll talk about this and we'll dive into that, and I'll make my bigotry a little bit more illuminated.
Definitely. Finally, I'll say this as well as I believe that both parties do or have. Maybe I'm being a little bit more generous by saying have, because of the amount of history I can throw into this, but I think both parties have benefited from racist dog whistling. From law and order candidates on the Democratic side, from all the above with Nixon and whatnot on the Republican side. So that's something I think I pretty much am consistent on. One thing I'll agree with you 100% is I think that cancel culture goes too far from the left. I think, just like you said with Crowder, we need to draw a line that one of the fundamentals of our country, and the line that needs to be protected, is comedy is like the greatest signal of true freedom of speech. The fact that Trevor Noah, I was watching today, can throw himself in the middle of a plane that's flying about to crash, right? Like not 9/11 associated whatsoever, by the way, but just there's a sketch where he was in a plane today. I'm like, okay, that's funny. Crowder with whatever you were describing with the Hitler thing. We need to protect comedy. Comedy is a true fundamental part of a country, and so is satire, and so when we go on this cancel idea. Sure, certain things are disingenuous, right? Certain things genuinely, like Trump's grabbing by by Ben Shapiro's definition, grabbing by
the B word,
right? We need to, that's pretty bad. That wasn't meant to be comedy, but when things are clearly, we need to be careful with the idea of cancel culture when we're discussing all of the above. So certain things I'm going to be pretty unmoved on. I don't think all the Republicans are racist. Don't think all the Democrats are racist. I do think there are definitely benefactors of both. And one last thing, Tim, you mentioned something really incredible that I wanted to touch on. You mentioned that, like, say you had two job applicants, one that's African American or black and one that's white, and they're relatively equal on paper, and you would hire the person that you most can relate to. Something you didn't say is that I did not infer that as you're going to automatically hire the white person, right? Maybe you play football and the African American black person plays football, and you guys vibe on football or Call of Duty or engineering or whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, and you had no association with the white person. You're going to hire the person that's relatable, and that's the beauty of our countries. We hire, that's okay, right? We can hire if they're equal on paper. It doesn't mean we're going to hire someone for specifically of cultural or racial. It's like, what do we like about this person? What do we agree with? What normatives kind of coincide? And so I think that was just something I wanted to touch on, because I think it was really powerful. I think somebody that was listening could have missed that. And so I just wanted to cover that, because that's the way I interpret it is, we can relate to people of different skin colors. We can celebrate differences. We can celebrate all that we bring to the table. So I think that's my ending note.
All right, let's Tim, go ahead and get us those comments.
Let's bang out some comments real quick.
Definitely. So I read the first one from Jamil already. One that I kind of liked, and I wish we'd have hit on this topic on this comment while we were talking. I don't know if I think it's pronounced Adele, but it says, if you grew up near government housing, you'd understand what Trump is talking about. It's not about race or ethnicity. It's about what kind of culture the low-income housing brings with it. And I definitely think that there's an argument there. And that's kind of, if you've heard some of the previous podcasts, I'm not a huge proponent of the current system being systematically racist. I think that there's definitely still portions that are, but I think that a lot of what's happening now is a result of systematic racism that has driven a cultural divide, and we need to find a way to bridge that gap between the cultures. I do not blame the parties of the cultures today, because I don't feel like the people that are around today, especially the younger generation, are at all at fault for the systematic racism of the past. Nor do I think that the African Americans that were subjected to that systematic racism were at fault for anything they did in the past. Like, it's unfortunate of what happened in the past, but you can look at every time bank in human history and see things that you don't agree with that happened based on what they thought was right at the time, or what their culture was. And I like that we're moving away from it. I like that we're talking about it. I like that we're trying to find solutions. What I don't like is that we're targeting each other from one party to the other, and rather than trying to find a way to find common ground and join together and actually find a solution to the problem, we're blaming each other and pointing fingers and actually getting nothing done. But I definitely think, Adele, you make a good point there. You guys have any comments on that?
I'll keep mine super brief, but relatively in agreement. And probably this is something Nathan, you and I will have a lot of agreement in. So I'm all for low-income housing. I'm all for government subsidized housing. I'm a benefactor of this. I will also say that we really need to change the dynamic of how we look at and structure these welfare institutions, and in the sense that if you are poor and you're struggling, or perceive that you are still in this fight or flight mode, even when you have low income housing, even when things might be relatively good, the bandwidth of what you have available to yourself in these moments of time, you're not thinking in the same rationality as someone who has the same opportunities of liberty, of comforts that right. And so you're very much operating in a sociological phenomenon of where, you do see crime, you do see crazy things. I remember and also, as someone who grew up in government housing, I remember like just cockroaches being everywhere, man. Like, that place sucks. Like, it's not conducive to growth. And I think that's the problem right here that we need to talk about, is when we are going to support somebody with food stamps or low income housing or whatnot, because we can't let people starve, right? I'm a firm believer, like, what do? Do we just let people die? And if somebody has no benefit to society, they're no longer helping society, right? Do we just let them die? I say no. I say we support them in one way or the other. So what we can do with those aside is, how can we help people develop human capital? And so I think more initiatives need to be taken in investing in people when someone is doing low income housing, truly, like Job Corps. Job Corps is the coolest model in the world. Job Corps gives you free housing while you're doing job training. They help you get employed. Once you're employed, boom, you're able to afford your own housing. Look at there's this incredible Christian rehabilitation center in Connecticut. Not saying it's incredible because it's Christian, but they actually have a really cool model where you go for drug rehab, right? You clean up, they pay for all of your housing, all of your rehab. You don't need insurance, you don't need anything. When you're done, no matter how long it takes, when you're done, they find you a job. It's not gonna be the most glamorous job. You might be working at a car wash, and like 5% of your income goes to the church for a couple years, right? Because they just gave you 6 months of freeness, right? So these are models that we should be looking to adapt, and not just say, okay, here's an opportunity to have some free food or housing for a bit of time, and let it become a crutch, which I do think it can be, unfortunately. I think that we should provide it as long as needed, as long as at the same time we're developing human capital. And by the time human capital is developed, someone will not want to be in low-income housing anymore because they can have a better quality of life by pursuing the developed human capital they've established.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Right, teach a man to fish, and you feed him for life. That kind of stuff. That's we and a lot of conservatives. You know, that is essentially the conservative motto. One might say.
I think the difference is we just give them a fishing pole too. Like, here's the tackle box.
True.
Here's the fishing bowl.
True.
Here's 6 months of fishing lessons.
Right,
now,
right.
boom, you're good.
Except when you account for the fact that Christian conservatives give twice as much to charity as any other demographic, including left liberals, which
they do, and that's
good people. I'm actually not one of them. But someday when I'm rich, I will start giving to charity. But I
thought you meant you're not a good person. I kind of agreed.
Yes. But so just to talk about it, I mean, and to relate it back to the podcast, if you hear a conservative making what you assume is a racist argument, think about whether are they talking about black people, are they talking about the melanin in their skin or an inferior race, or are they talking about a culture, right? And we got into that a lot, earlier when we were talking about Pakistan and Iran, where like I have a problem with Pakistani culture but not Iranian culture, but they have the same skin color. This goes with the low income housing. Like, there is a culture of poverty. It doesn't matter if it's a white meth user or a black crack user. Are those the stereotypes? Am I allowed to do that?
You might be stereotyping a little bit, but
right.
Sure, go for it.
Right. No offense if that offends anybody.
White or black drug user. There you go.
Right. So as
white people do use meth at a higher frequency, African American and black individuals do have a higher based on where these drugs were distributed.
Right.
So I think, for the sake of it, it's a stereotype, but not inaccurate right now.
So the conservative will have a problem with a freeloader or a druggie or all these things. And I think it's just important to point out it's almost always cultural, right? It's almost never about the race, right? Unless you find a genuine racist, which I think I've met one in my entire life, like one genuine race, maybe two.
To kind of close on that, and then I'll read the next comment. That same person I was talking about that kind of puts his hand near his wallet when he's walking past a black person. I noticed he did that a couple times, and so I asked him. I said, "Why do you do that?" And he said, "Oh, it's just instinct." He's like, "You don't kind of get nervous?" And I said, "Let me ask you something." I said, if that person that just walked by, because they generally were dressed in, like an urban attire, some saggy pants, and like a tank top or something. I said, if that person was dressed in a suit, would you have the same reaction? And he said, no, actually, I don't think I would. Right. So it's more cultural in a way, right? For him, it's the way the person appears. If that person appeared in a suit to be, upkept, well maintained.
I don't really want to get into this, but
I know,
you
but
don't
it's
think
just
that's
an
a valid
interesting
distinction?
I do.
Okay. All right.
I do.
All right.
I do think it's a valid distinction.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll get into.
So I was agreeing with you on that. Yeah, I was not disagreeing. I was agreeing.
There's actually an incredible whole other podcast, but an incredible conversation to be had on the normatives of dress, style, and how that's also could be perpetuated. Right? Like you see an African American and black person with straight hair in a suit. Oh, then they're a fine citizen because they've assimilated to full-blown white culture. But it's like, if you go Google, after when you're done with this podcast, go Google unprofessional hair. And it's like, you're going to find people, Google is going to give you pictures of people with afros, cornrows. And it's like, shit, like that's people's natural hair. What do you mean it's unprofessional? It's what you're born with. How do you, like, if this is the hair I'm born with, what do you mean this would be unprofessional, right? Like, I can't change my straight hair. Right. It's how my hair is.
All right, we can get into that. White people can have unprofessional hair too. It's possible.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I can do my hair out like 3 feet, but that's like my choice. I can't choose like curly
Tim's hair. Look at Tim's hair right now.
This is not by choice.
It's unprofessional. You're fired, sir.
And then I was going to make one comment on what you said too, Chris. The increased crime from low income groups. Have you ever heard the phrase, what do I have to lose? Right? I mean, if you have low income, you don't have a lot of things going on, you're more apt to lean towards crime. So it makes sense that low income people commit more crime, and that that impoverished communities and societies. Right? Yeah, exactly. And not just within the U.S., but if you look around the world, impoverished groups and impoverished societies have a much higher crime rate. So, one of the reasons I'm a proponent for supporting, outside of just the moral thing where I feel like it's the right thing to do to help people, from a societal standpoint, I think it's the right thing to do to feed people and keep people, in a decent lifestyle and help them get back on their feet, because it reduces crime and it increases the safety of the entire population. So I'll stop there because we can go on for hours.
Right. No comment.
The next comment was also from Adele. She said the definition of white has changed a lot in the last 100 years. She said, I'm Italian, and my grandparents were not considered white when they came to this country. Neither were the Irish. And there's truth to that. Yeah, there's definitely some truth to that. I don't know enough about the history on how the immigrants were treated, the tortures and things that they went through. And I don't mean by being tortured, but just difficulties of life. Yeah. So it's something to be interesting. But I do think that they, as a culture, likely did not experience those things for the amount of time that the African American culture and community has, for the length of time.
Nor to the degree, nor to the degree, and it is also not to undermine like the again, not to play anecdotals, but like my quadruple great grandma was like a mail order bride from Ireland to go to Canada during the potato famine, right? Like that's pretty messed up when you look at history. How that someone had to go to that desperation and therefore came to the United States, probably went through the whole struggles of being an Irish individual in the United States. What I'm getting at is that those were choices to move forward and get to the next place. Whereas when we look at African-American individuals, especially those who were brought over by through slavery, which was not that long ago, and the ramifications of slavery were definitely not that long ago when we start taking into consideration Jim Crow and whatnot. That wasn't really a choice. These people kind of were forced over here, and they were never allowed into the majority, right? Eventually, Irish people were allowed into the majority. Eventually, Polish people were allowed into that majority idea. Not when I say majority, I mean like whiteness, right? Like eventually, Italian people were accepted as whiteness. Myself, like I'm an Iranian American, I guess, but I'm a white dude, right? Like I've never once been questioned on my race, ethnicity. I'm a white dude. I've always been perceived as
suffered as a white dude. You had a fairly
sure. Well, I've suffered through poverty and whatnot, but never. But also, at the same time, like my dad was deported, right? Like so, I've also faced the problems of non-white individuals. But the deeper than that, I have also not experienced the struggles that a Black or an African American individual would have gone through with the same storyline as me. Like I've never. Here's the reality. White kids are adopted more likely than African American and Black kids, right? There's more people of color in group homes. People that are in group homes do disproportionately worse in long-term outcomes than those who are adopted. So I definitely, when someone, whether they were thinking it or not, when the family that brought me in saw that,
Chris,
they very much. Yeah.
Are they adopted disproportionate to the population? Because I'm actually
I was going to ask the same.
Yeah, they are. White people are more likely to be adopted proportional to the population.
As in, like their percentage, like
domestic adoption.
Like there's 45% white people, and then like 60% of the white kids get adopted.
I'm curious. What percentage? What percentage of the adoptees are white versus Black? Like how many Black people? How many Black families are adopting children compared to white?
So there's the great struggle here too. Is like you gotta. I can get these numbers for you. It's been a hot second since I touched on them, so I don't want to just like throwing random stats.
Let's do that as maybe a minor segment, maybe next time or something.
Sure.
Like that,
You do have to do.
Because I feel like there might be a reason, not as much that white families or the Black families aren't adopting any Black kids, but that probably there's less Black families adopting kids.
Yeah, most adopted families are white, and I will say this too is. You have to do some statistical gymnastics here because also most kids in foster care are kids of color, right? So you also there's an overrepresentation of youth of color. So you really have to do some statistical gymnastics, but I can pull all that for you so you can make sense of it.
Good.
All right.
So last two here.
He redacted it.
He took his message back. Last one here.
Going to read it, man. It wasn't a bad comment.
Yeah, it was fine. So Jamil, he said, thanks for the shout out. This is powerful information and a great dialogue. So we appreciate the feedback and we enjoy going through the comments.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Definitely, thanks for joining. And once, as we keep this going and we get rid of some of these, he put it back. Okay. So Jamil also said, welfare is a system that should be discussed. I'd like to see a system that promotes progression towards independence versus the current system. Yeah.
I think most of us agree with that.
100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say,
go ahead, Chris.
On my end, let's provide support as much as needed. So I also believe in relatively unconditional investment to be able to get someone, really meet them where they're at and get them to the next step, whatever that might be, which might differentiate between someone on the more conservative side of the spectrum. So I'm again,
the conservative will just say use the church or the local community center.
Got it. So I'm like, government, let's give the fishing rod, the fishing toolbox. Let's give them the bait. Let's teach them how to fish. Let's even throw some fish in the water so they can learn how to fish, to pull it out. And then we'll bring them to a river eventually that has its own fish, and we'll work on it from there. Right. So that
promotes strong families to help raise them with good values. Yeah.
If they forget how to fish, we'll restart the cycle.
I generally agree with you, except for the indefinite part. I think part of the issue is that when it's indefinite, there's less motivation to push yourself forward, to improve, and to move on. A good example is during the 2008 crisis, when unemployment continued to get extended and extended and extended. I know some people that got laid off that could have gone back to work, but they chose not to because they were going to make very slightly more than what they were getting on the unemployment than going back to work. And so they chose to just continue to take the unemployment. So eventually that did, obviously run out, but I think the person I'm thinking of in general, I think he ended up getting 2 years of unemployment or something like that.
Wow.
Through all of that, all of this stuff. So, and he could have gotten a job and he chose not to. And,
that sucks.
The point, it isn't, but that's what I would do. That's what most people would do. Right? If you either have to give up I'm not saying would never go back to work. So I actually believe in, so Andrew Yang was a guy that I really got a lot of information from and liked. I actually believe in UBI. I think that would work well. And I don't think it would keep people from working.
Podcast. That's a podcast.
Exactly. Yeah, let's do it. But, and I don't think it would keep people from working, but I do think that if I tell you, Nathan, I'm going to write you a check for, 5% under what you're currently making working your job, are you going to continue working your job, or are you going to find something else that you enjoy doing with your time?
Double income, baby. No, heck yeah, still work.
Well, the person I'm talking about was 58 years old.
Okay, but you mean I would lose it if I worked?
So
I don't know. Am I a person who?
Yeah, you would lose it if you worked, right? Or so would you? Or would you say, hey, look, now I can free up my time and I can spend all my time on this podcast, this thing I want to grow and figure out.
Right. So that's the thing, is I would work on the podcast.
But that's a passion project. Yeah. So anyway, we all agree with you.
I see your point. I see your point, though.
And we, finding that middle ground, I think we should do a podcast on that particularly, because I think there's a lot to talk about and it'd be interesting.
And I just want to point out, you can find that middle ground without talking about race, because race has nothing to do with it, even when the conservatives are talking about it. You see what I'm saying? Like, we did not once mention black people when we were talking about welfare incentives.
So answering this whole welfare question was race-free until you Republican opened your mouth.
I'm tying it back to the podcast. Look at good co-host. All right, well, that's about our time anyways.
Everything I would say on this topic I've said earlier, so my senses are already pretty clear. So I do believe race is an intersection, but we'll discuss that in a future dynamic. I'll say this, that it's easier to experience upward mobility if you are a white person in this country. Granted, there's still significant struggles that someone has to go through. Whole other podcast, we'll talk about it.
Whole other podcast.
Racism.
Oh, we do. So for for those who are curious, we actually want to do the next podcast. I think the next podcast we want to do it on economic mobility or the American dream, or how the middle class is faring, how poor. Like we want to do a solid economics podcast, and I think that one's going to be a lot of fun. As fun or funner than this one. So.
This was a good one. This was good.
Absolutely.
Finally, something that I can put numbers up front on.
I know. And we'll use links more next time. I think we used one link out of all the links that we had. So
yeah. So we need to work on the
yes
internet too. This is a rough one.
Yeah, I'm looking at it live. It's still horrible. So
it's really bad.
No, we're fine.
Thank you everybody who commented. We love all of you, and we hope that you will continue patronizing us with your viewership. Hit like and subscribe so that you'll get our content every week. And with that, we're off.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, take care, guys.